Now let's speak quick on tight ends. So tight ends, before we get started, it's kind of a weird situation. Normally in the past, we've had guys like Jason Witten, Antonio Gates, even Martellus Bennett the last couple of years to like truly depend on at the tight end position. But this year it's a little different with those guys gone. So I have a clear number one tier by himself, and we're going to call him Rob Gronkowski. Do you agree or disagree he's by himself, or do you have other guys with him?
Nah, no one's near him. He's by far the best tight end in the NFL right now. He's just, even if you put him in the receiver category, I'd still put him as a top 10 receiver in the league. Not to mention he has the best quarterback ever born into the world.
Born into existence.
Yes, Thomas Brady. So, yeah, I agree. Gronk is by far...
I will say there's the injury bug with him. Some reason he's always hurt.
Yeah.
And I think he's always hurt around the time you need him in fantasy playoffs. Right around week 10, 11, 12 to 13, 14, 15. He's always hurt, always nicked up. So if you do draft Gronk early, which we're not necessarily condoning you do, we suggest you definitely grab a backup tight end that you won't have any problems starting 5-6 times during the season.
Yeah, I'd say Gronk is just about the only tight end I would reach for in like the first 3 rounds, maybe. I think he might get picked.
He's been going round 2 a lot. Yeah, so it's scary. Like Jack said, he does have wide receiver 1 production as his ceiling, but the injury risk a little too high for me.
Yeah, the injury risk is really high. I actually had him on my team last year. Drafted, I had the 12th pick, so I went 12-13. I went Melvin Gordon, Rob Gronkowski. Lost in the semis, but it was a good pick. But like you said, about halfway through the season, he was on my bench for like 2-3 weeks.
And then you have to stream tight ends, which we'll get to in a little bit. All right, tier 2, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz. I think those are the clear number 2 guys that kind of are separate from everybody. Before I get your take on it, I will say these guys have the highest floors week to week. They're guaranteed targets. They're guaranteed red zone looks with competent quarterbacks and running schemes around them. I think these guys are dominant, and they should be drafted as such.
Yeah. Zach Ertz, love him. He's going to be even better once Carson Wentz gets back in the lineup. Travis Kelce, another one of those guys, maybe not comparable to a wide receiver 1, but I'd say Travis Kelce is basically a wide receiver 2. That's a kind of production that he's going to get you. You know that dude's a gamer. He loves to play football. He loves to win. So I just really like him as a football player. It's going to be interesting with P. Mahomes to see what that connection is going to be like.
Yeah, Kelsey's a vertical guy, so I think it's going to match pretty well because he likes to throw down the field. Okay, so those are our top 3, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz. And then I have a group of 5 tight ends that are going to sound pretty popular and are going to be drafted, I think, a little too early. So I have this list. Let me kind of break it down. Give me a second here. I got Greg Olsen, Evan Ingram, Delaney Walker, Jimmy Graham, and Kyle Rudolph. So what I think is going to happen in most drafts, and I think you can agree with this, is Gronk's going to go early. And there's going to be a couple rounds of only running backs and wide receivers being taken. And then somebody's going to go grab Kelce. And then that's going to make somebody go grab Ertz. And once that happens, I think people are going to start reaching for tight ends too early.
Yep.
And I'm not ready to draft a guy like Olsen, Ingram, Walker, Graham, or Rudolph in the 4th or 5th round, where some of these guys are kind of starting to go as the season gets closer. So do you like any of those guys? And if so, why?
I really like Delaney Walker. I've had him on my fantasy team the past 2 years, and he's got Marcus Mariota as his QB.
He uses him as a safety valve, I will say that.
Yeah, he's a huge red zone target for Mariota. And Mariota's super quick on his feet, so he gets pushed out of the pocket, rolls out, and Delaney Walker's just chilling in there. Huge target, easy to hit, great hands. Boom. He'll get you 10 to 12 points a week on average. Not a bunch, but one of those guys where you know what you're getting from him.
Yeah.
He will have a couple weeks where he'll get 100, 150 yards and drop 20, 25 points. But he'll most of the time stay in that 10 to 12 point range. But you know what you're going to get.
And I think you want that too from the tight end, that kind of floor of 5-6 catches for 40 to 60 yards every week. But the other guys, Greg Olsen, I just think he's too old. Cam Newton does rely on him as a target. Evan Ingram, though, I like him a lot as a player. I know I know I told you guys I made a trade for him in the Dynasty League, but I think there's just not enough targets that are going to be spread around there. You got a guy like Barkley in the backfield taking carries, and then you look on the outsides, Shepard and Odell Beckham. Those are some guys that demand the football. Continuing, Jimmy Graham has been the really hot pick recently, but one stat got me off of him. Well, really, two stats, and it's one, he was first in tight ends or for touchdowns last season. He received the let's reword that. He was the number one tight end in touchdowns last season.
There you go.
And 17th in yards. So that stat alone is going to show you that he's a big red zone target, but he really only catches touchdowns. And then him going to Green Bay, only 16% of Aaron Rodgers' touchdowns in the last 5 years have gone to tight ends. He hasn't had the best group of tight ends, but that doesn't matter to me. Only 16% of touchdowns have gone to tight ends. And when you get a tight end that depends on touchdowns to score fantasy points, I don't see that as a very good mix.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Jimmy Graham, he was on Seattle, right? Mm-hmm. And then he went to New Orleans.
Well, he started in New Orleans and he went to Seattle.
New Orleans, he was amazing.
Well, they ran him as a slot guy there. That was a little bit different. And see, that's what teams should do. They put him in the slot. He was a big Gronk-esque guy.
Yeah, and then he went to Seattle.
And they made him a blocker.
Yeah, and he was just blocking the entire time. So it all honestly just depends on how the Packers are going to integrate him into the offense. I think it's going to be hit or miss with Jimmy Graham. He's a huge target for Tom Brady. And I think Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, he's a huge target for him. And if they just build their relationship a little bit better, I think Jimmy Graham's either going to have a huge year and be one of the, I'd say, top 3 tight ends, or you're going to see what you saw with him in Seattle.
Yeah, I can agree with that. We just don't know where he stands. Going down a tier, I think this is where we can kind of start to open up and kind of view our tight end slots. This is definitely where I'm looking at most drafts. Trey Burton. So he went out to Chicago. Mitch Trubisky loves the tight end, and the OC that came from Kansas City, he's their head coach now. He loves throwing to the tight end, as we saw with Travis Kelce. And then around him, I got Jordan Reed. If Jordan Reed can stay healthy, he can be a top 5 tight end in the league. The problem is he hasn't done it the last 4 years.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, he was on fantasy draft boards for tight ends. He was number 1.
Number 1. And with Gronk there, too.
Yeah, with Gronk. And he's just hasn't really been able to stay healthy enough all season. So he's one of those guys where, like you said, if he stays healthy, I think the production you're going to get is massive.
Mm-hmm. David Njoku, give me 3 words to describe him. 3, 2, 1, go.
Very big man.
Wow, I like that. That was a perfect one. Very big man, and I'm going to say upside, upside, upside.
Yeah, watching Hard Knocks has really turned me on to Njoku. I can tell that he is very athletic, and he's a huge target. There is a couple episodes, or I guess a couple clips in the Hard Knocks episode where he was dropping a few balls. So that's the only thing that worries me about him. Other than that, he's a physical specimen.
I will say, when he did drop the balls in practice, Hugh Jackson's punishment was he had to catch 30 balls on the jugs machine. And he looked pretty prima donna about it. And I don't like that. I think if we're going to have to yell at you to get on the jug machine, Antonio Brown's catching 100, 150 a day, and you got to catch 30. Not to say not to draft him, but I mean, he's got a little bit of pettiness in him, I think. He doesn't want to hop on the jugs machine.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. It's also a ridiculous punishment. For dropping footballs, I feel like you got to give him something way more difficult than catching 30 balls from a jugs machine.
I think it's got to be like 100, but anyways.
Yeah.
All right, George Kittle. San Francisco guy, I will say, I don't know, Jack doesn't like him that much. I would say keep him on your draft boards. He is a low round, high upside guy. Kind of matches in, I wouldn't say he'll fall to be a free agent in drafts, but I mean, kind of one of those guys I think you'll be able to see on the waiver wire if you get lucky in drafts. Just keep an eye on him. Okay, and then lastly, I have tier 5. I'm going to rattle off some names. I don't think any of these guys are draftable because I don't see more than 75% of your league drafting a backup tight end. I think most teams have figured out to only draft one, kind of wait for their bye week, and then pick up one as a free agent. But here's my free agent list. I got Charles Clay, OJ Howard, Tyler Eifert, Eric Ebron, Cameron Braid, Ben Watson, Jaron Cook, and Austin Seferian Jenkins. Do any of those guys kind of pop out to you as targets on the waiver wire post draft?
Yeah, Tyler Eifert. Tyler Eifert, one of those guys. I mean, I don't really like Andy Dalton too much, but he does give Eifert a lot of targets.
And when he was healthy 2 seasons ago, he was a beast, man.
Yeah,
Like,
he was on my
good.
squad, and he was getting off.
Yeah, he's a Travis Kelce light, I'll say. Kind of runs that middle of the field. Not as big, not as fast, but they do kind of demand him the ball. And with A.J. Green demanding the safety on the sideline, I think it leaves the middle of the field wide open for him a lot. Also, too, keep your eyes on Charles Clay. Kind of a weird spot, I think, but young quarterbacks look for tight end outlets. And I think if you can guarantee 7-8 catches across the middle of the field and you get him in the last round of a draft or as a free agent before a good matchup, I think that's a steal. Any ideas on strategies before we wrap this up as far as tight end goes? Is there like a certain group of guys or a guy you're really trying to target?
Yeah, I mean, it all just kind of depends on how you want to do your draft. So basically, you got to decide if you want to reach one for Gronk, which is going to be basically a round 2 pick.
Yeah.
If you take Gronk, you got to get him round 2. So you got to decide if you want to do that or if you want to wait to like rounds maybe 5 or 6 where you're going to get the Kelce and the Zach Ertz picks.
I think they're higher. I think they're like 4 or 5. And I think round 6 is where you'll get like Olsen, Ingram, Walker, and Grant.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, depending on the running back I get, might reach for Gronk, probably not going to. And then I think I'm just going to wait all the way until about round 6 or 7 when you see the guys like Greg Olsen going. Then at that point, once those guys start going, everyone else in the draft is thinking, oh shit, I got to get this guy
Because by then,
because I don't want to. Yeah, because I don't want to be playing with, I don't know, George Kittle. They're like, shoot, I need to draft a Delaney Walker, a Kyle Rudolph. So my draft strategy, I'm going for those middle of the pack guys like Evan Ingram